Hi, I'm Donna Wilder.
And I'm Janie Donaldson. Welcome to Quilt Central, where we'll be clowning around today.
We're moving into the bedroom where we've taken the clown theme to create the bed covering and the wall hanging.
Thank you for joining us.
Funding for Quilt Central has been provided by the American Quilter Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Sulky of America, taking creativity to new heights with decorated threads, stabilizers, and books. Bernina of America, nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. Pennywinkle Valley Ranch, the home quilting system. EZ Quilting by Wrights, share the excitement. Quilting Arts Magazine, techniques for art, quilting, and embellishments. Quilting Machines International, providing quilting machines and supplies for the world. FreeSpirit Fabrics, quilting fabrics with style. Quilt Central, celebrating quilting in everyday living with your hosts Jane Donaldson and Donna Wilder.
From the windows to the walls, we've had a wacky time decorating the child's bedroom. Let's take a look at the before picture. And now, look at what's happened when we've transformed this room into a real fun place. We're starting with the window treatment. We've used the striped fabric with a little decorative trim on the top. We're moving down to the dresser cover, where we've quilted that with some designs. The bed was created by using the full print of the fabric and quilting it on the long arm quilting machine. And then the quilts that we've added to the walls. The first one features the trip around the world and has some more of the fabrics around it. The second one, and the one we're going to work on today, is the clown quilt. And joining me to show us how this was done is Joyce Drexler. Joyce is with Sulky of America, the maker of decorative thread and stabilizers. Welcome, Joyce.
Thanks, Donna, for inviting me. You know, I had so much fun planning this out. You know how I have these grandchildren I have to always make something for, so this was a perfect project.
And the best part of it is you have to make the step-by-steps to show, so you don't get one quilt, but you get a couple of quilts out of this one.
Exactly, so you can have something for every grandchild in your group. Unless you have 7 or 8 kids, then you might not.
Well, you did such a great job taking a fabric and then interpreting the clown design in the center area. It's wonderful.
That was the greatest part, was being able to take the small little clown that was on the printed fabric and blow him up and design an applique from that. And that's exactly what I did.
What a good idea. So how did you then create it on the center area?
Well, the center is just a plain blue background because I just wanted to have something plain with all the bright colors on top of it. And in order to get my appliques positioned correctly, I made a pattern off of the paper pattern. I drew a pattern onto this heavy water-soluble stabilizer. It can act as a template for you in placing your applique pieces where you want them to be, so that when you get done, it's nice and centered, and so you can just slip it under there and know if it should be tilted or whichever direction it needs to be. And we decided to put Smile as our little block.
Oh, that is so cute.
You always want your kids to smile.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Now, once you have your clown pieces in place, you may find that you would want to spray them if you don't use a fusible web. You can use a temporary spray adhesive, and what I do is just simply lightly spray the backs of them, and they'll stay in place.
And you said you don't need to do a stabilizer on this because you're going to outline stitch it.
You do need to use a stabilizer behind it when you stitch it, but you don't have to use a fusible web
that's right.
to keep them adhered, because you're going to be stitching right along the edge and finishing the edge, so you don't really need that fusible, and the fusible sometimes will make it a little stiffer, so we're avoiding that.
Good, good.
So once we have our clown pieces in place, and I have another one over here, Donna.
Okay, I'll take that one.
We want to make sure that we do stabilize the back, And the way that we do that is with an iron-on fusible.
Okay.
And this fusible stabilizer is slick on one side and matte on the other side. So once you have your pieces in place, you're going to put this on the back so that when you are doing your applique stitch, you won't be having any tunneling or any pinching happening or wrinkling.
And I don't know what we did without stabilizers.
I know. How did we ever make anything look good?
That's right.
But this is the shiny side, so that's the
that's
sign
down.
that's down. And then you just want to run your iron right over it, just rather rapidly, because this doesn't need a lot of heat to stay down.
Okay.
It is a reusable thing, so sometimes I save the extra pieces when I tear it off. But you don't need to really have it down really hard with the iron, because you can reuse the pieces if you don't use up all the fusible. So this is what our clown looks like at this point. Now, if you'll bring the other piece over.
Okay, let's bring this one in.
I did want to just talk a minute about the fabrics that we chose to use. When you're doing something that's so beautiful like this with these primary colors that are so bright, it was great to be able to get all the coordinate fabrics.
Right.
And then to get the coordinate colors of the threads that we needed to go with them. Now, because I had this on a blue background like this, I decided to use a color that would actually stand out, and since some of these had blue backgrounds behind them, I didn't want them to sink into the background. So I decided to emphasize them with nice bright
Contrasting
colors.
color is the way.
And they're so nice and shiny, just like the fabric is bright, it makes it wonderful. Now, one of the things that people sometimes have a problem with is getting a face on something like this. And that can be so simple if you again trace your design from the permanent pattern onto the water-soluble stabilizer.
And that's what we used earlier to use for the pattern.
For the pattern. Now this time we're using it on top of the fabric to actually stitch over to give us a pattern line to follow for the mouth and the nose and the eyes. And then when you're done, you can just simply tear this up away from the thread, because it's going to perforate off.
Okay.
And if there is any left, it will wash away, or you can take a little spray and just simply spray it and it'll dissolve.
Oh, that's clever.
But this is a great way to use it also as a guide for a stitching guide.
So you do your lines on it, put it on, and then it stabilizes it and gives you the pattern all in one. That's
all in
great.
one thing. It's really terrific.
Good.
Now, in making this, we had a good time using these fabrics. We had a fabric, one of them was this stripe. And what's really clever about this is if you cut it on the bias, you end up having this effect with it.
Wonderful.
Which we really liked that effect. We thought it added a lot of motion to the actual design. And then to make the little blocks that we have here, we used some of these letter blocks that are from the border print, but we cut away the excess border.
Right.
And we made them smaller, and we wrote out the word smile.
That is so cute. And you could put the child's name
You could
or
put
their
anything
favorite
you
pet
want.
or whatever you wanted.
Exactly, just
Good.
whatever you liked. But it was so nice to have the letterings already done for you with the little clown motif right by it.
That's great.
And of course, when you're doing this type of satin stitching, you want to loosen your top tension on your sewing machine.
Okay.
And you want to use an open-toed foot.
Right.
Because this will allow you to see your line as you're doing your satin stitching. And of course, it's always correct to leave your needle down on the outside edge and pivot the fabric and then continue, so you get nice lapped over lines like this.
It looks, your stitching is so even and consistent.
Right.
It really looks good.
And having a closed satin stitch is what you do. All you have to really do on the machine is use about a 3 width and then about a 2 length, or whatever on your machine makes it nice and close together. This is a 40 weight thread, but you could also use a 30 weight, which is a heavier weight thread that fills in a little faster. But it's so nice to have all the beautiful colors.
Oh, yes, and they really work well here.
And then what we did to add the borders on, as we were cutting the pieces for the border, you want to make sure that you don't cut the little writing off. You want to leave a little edge on there so that you have the seam allowance. And then we just put a corner block in here. Now, why don't you flip the other one over?
Sure. This is when it really starts to look like fun.
This is really the nice looking part. Now, this was quilted in different types of quilting. And what we do when we do a quilt like this is we take the temporary spray adhesive and we have taped down the backing. We spray that on the wrong side,
Right.
lay the batting down,
Right.
and then fold the top piece so the wrong side's up, spray that lightly, and fold it down, fold up the other side, spray that lightly, and that actually bastes your quilt pieces together, your
So
sandwich.
it's sort of just holding it, tacking it together by
That's
using
right.
that.
Now you can also place pins if you want to, but we find that that holds it together nicely. And I just used a nice low loft batting in between.
Great.
Now this is done with a metallic thread, and when we did these little edges, we pieced some of those solid blocks from the stripe
Oh,
together.
you did the blocks again.
Yes.
What a good idea.
Because it was a coordinating
Yes,
fabric,
it's
it made it
perfect.
perfect. And that's how we got our little checkerboard going on
Oh,
here.
aren't you clever?
And of course, at the end, you would trim off your selvages edges and straighten the quilt out and put your binding on, and you'd have a beautiful quilt.
Well, I think your grandchildren are going to like these projects. It really is spectacular, and everything you do is so precise and so perfect.
Oh, thank you, Donna.
Thank you for joining us today. And now let's go to Jane, who's going to show us how this quilting was done.
My guest is Nancy Knaus from the Pennywinkle Valley Ranch. Hi, Nancy.
Hi, Jeannie.
She has invented a quilting frame that will hold a domestic machine, and I am just so curious to know about it. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, about 8 years ago, Jerry saw me fighting with rolling up my quilt and folding it and throwing it over my shoulder and putting the ironing board and the whole works of the safety pins inside of my sewing machine, and he said there's got to be a better way. So I checked into some other machine quilters, and we couldn't afford it. And he goes, well, give me a couple weeks, I'll come up with something for you. So this is what he made for me.
What a clever guy.
Oh yeah,
So
it's just
lucky.
great, just absolutely great. And since then, because of friends encouraging us to sell them to him, so I've sold a couple to some quilt friends and to quilt shops, and then some people came along and just said, hey Nancy, why don't you start vending, you know, start going to the quilt shows and sharing this with the quilt ladies. And I go, sure, why not? And we've been doing that now for a little over a year.
Just a wonderful invention. And your name is Pennywinkle Valley Ranch. How did you ever come up with that?
We bought this little farm out in the country, and out in the backyard there's this old smokehouse, and there was a sign buried back there, and it said Pennywinkle Valley Ranch, and it had all the people that lived back in this little hollow's name written down on it, and that's how I came up with that name. And the name Pennywinkle comes from, there's a little creek in our backyard, and a pennywinkle is this tiny little black snail that eats the algae off the rocks in the creek.
Oh, and that's where they got it from, so you just adapted that to your business.
Right.
How cute. Well, can you tell us a little how this works?
Sure. What you do is take your home portable sewing machine and you set on the carriages and you set your quilt in, and once you do that, and then all you have to do is just try to decide on where and how you want to quilt it. I think that's probably about the hardest part to do. When you do that, then all you do is just decide what you're going to do and just start quilting. And on here I'm just doing a meandering stitch, so that way I can fill in the area. Being this is going to be a child's quilt, all you need to do is just have it to keep it together.
How easy. Fast and easy.
Yes, it definitely goes a lot faster than doing it the old way.
So any machine will just fit right onto this carriage.
Yes, I have not found one yet that will not work. It's pretty adaptable to home sewing machines.
So I would say this would be really unique for people that want to do their grandchildren's quilts, or they want to do just for themselves at home. It's kind of like an accessory to a machine.
Oh yes, a lot of the ladies that I've spoke to, they have dozens of quilt tops that are made.
Don't we all?
Yes, we all do. And this is an alternative for them.
So Nancy, you've seen those long rolls or pantographs. You can do those with this too, can't you?
Yes, you can. I just lay it out on the board here and put a little pointer down and I can follow it. Also, I have laid them out on here. I've marked it with chalk. Also, I will use the block itself as my guide to what I'm going to quilt.
Well, that's kind of neat, because you can use what's already in the patchwork to go from place to place. Could you show us a little of that?
Sure. What I will do here is just go around the block. And then also, once I get to the point to where I cannot quilt any further, I will go ahead and advance the quilt. And to do that, all I have to do is lift up these two ratchets.
Oh, how easy.
And then I just roll it to advance my quilt so then I can continue on again.
Right to the next spot.
And I just draw it back up tight again. And then I will just pick up my quilting again and then start off.
You can get so accurate. You can get right in the ditch if you want it.
Well, that you can. I have found it's really simple.
Well, can we see just a little bit more of that? I think we missed one block here. We might be able to come back down and do that one.
Sure, let's go back here. I'll come down here and across. It really is endless on what you can do. You're not limited to only just your stippling. You can also, I have done baby blankets to where I have put their names and their birth dates and written their weights on it.
Well, how big of a quilt can you do on here?
I've done up to king-size quilts.
Oh, my goodness.
You'll find that you can roll it up a lot tighter, and so you save a lot more room. It's not like doing it free motion on the kitchen table.
Well, that is so nifty. I think every woman should have one in her sewing room, and I can see how that would really be help to patchwork teachers. If they had one in their classroom, then they could, when the people finish their patchwork, they could just take their regular sewing machine, put it right on there, and finish the quilt right at the end of the class and go home with a completed piece. So I can really see the value. I want to thank you so much for coming and showing us your invention.
Sure, you're welcome, and thank you for having us.
My next guest is going to share some of the accessory ideas that we had in the child's bedroom. Joining me is Pat DeSantis, who represents Conso, Wrights, and EZ Quilting. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, Donna. It's good to be back here doing things.
Well, it's a long title for you now with
Yes.
all the new companies together.
More companies to talk about.
Well, the accessories really add so much to that room. And let's get started on the projects that you did.
Well, first we want to talk about the valance over the window there. And we used a board to do it with. And this is a styrofoam board.
Okay.
Which comes with actually hooks that you just drill into the wall. And
like
then
a
you just put your curtain on here and set it right on those brackets. And
So
it's
you
done.
can pin the curtain in?
You can
is
pin the
that-
curtain into this, you can glue it on, you can do whatever you
right.
want. And you cut it down to the right size by just taking a regular knife. I have a saw here kind of. Just take a regular saw like that, cut it down to the size that it needs to be. If you need two, our window here uses two.
Okay, great. And then the colorful stripe that you used is great. That's a fun.
When I got that fabric, I thought, I know where that one's going.
good.
That's the
Good, good.
valance that we're going to use. But what I've done here is I've sewn on the magic curtain tapes.
Okay.
And they're called magic because they are with a drawstring. And if you hold one end, now what you
Okay.
do is you measure your window.
Okay.
Then you multiply it by whatever it says on the directions. This happens to be 2.5 times.
Okay.
So you start out with that. And the thing is, you have to go with what the curtain says to, what the tape says to use.
You can't cut it short.
You can't cut it any
Okay.
shorter because you can't piece it together, and you'll see
Okay.
why. You have knots on the ends of the string.
Okay.
You see there's two knots
We've
on your
tied
side,
these.
too. We've tied them nice and tight. Now, if you hold one end,
All right.
I'll take the other end, and all it does is gather it up. Now, this is our broken pencil pleat.
Okay.
And so you'll see how it gathers up.
Oh, yes.
See how it gathers up nicely?
Should I push those down?
Yep, push them down to your
I
end
get
there.
some of those down there. Now, this was sewn on by machine, is
This
that
was
correct?
sewn on by machine, yeah.
Okay.
And I just used, with all these colors, I used an invisible thread. It worked very well.
Oh, that's good, because when you don't have know which one to use, it's nice to use those
Right.
invisible.
But
So-
you just move it, we'll show
Okay.
just a small piece here as to how exactly it goes. But see, this is a broken pencil pleat.
Is that because you've got this little
Yeah,
stitch in
see,
there?
they're kind of, yeah, almost looks like a smocking. We have a smocking
yeah.
one too, but this one is
It
much,
does,
much
that's
easier to
great.
use. Then all you do is you take
give
it.
you this one.
Yeah, and we just lay it across.
Uh-huh.
Give yourself some around the return. And then there are U-shaped pins that just come with it. And all you
Let
do
me
is pin
show
them
one
into the
of those.
styrofoam.
Here's
yeah.
what they look like. So they're,
Yeah.
whoops, let me pull that up there. It looks like a U shape.
And it comes in the kit, and you just pin it on that way.
Wow. And they just go right in between.
They just go right in between.
And push
the
them
of course,
down.
there's so many pleats that it hides the pins anyway, so it works out very well.
I think I could make these. This is my kind
Put
of
it up on
window
the brackets.
treatment.
And one thing to remember, you never ever cut off the strings.
Okay.
I don't know if you've had handmade
when it
drapes
comes
dry
undone,
clean, but this
yes.
way you just undo it and you have a flat piece of fabric to work with.
Now, does this come in many
cleaned or washed.
different pleating
Yes,
designs?
it does. It comes in every one of the designer pleats. You name it,
good.
and it's available in this.
So this is a little more casual. You can have a really elegant look for a living room.
Yeah.
Well, now, what are we working on underneath here?
Well, underneath here, we've got the makings of a dresser scarf that we've done.
That looks nice.
And I've got the pieces together because what I really want to talk about is this sliding stencil.
Isn't
And
this
I don't know if the
clever?
camera can see it really good, but see what
Put
it
it
is.
over the blue.
It's 2 pieces of plastic, and it gives you, it's got tabs in it, so it gives you this much play. You know when you're doing a border around a quilt,
Yes.
you always end up, you start somewhere, you end up, you got to fudge the middle when you get there.
Exactly.
This keeps it all equal because all you do is you take a measuring tape, measure how wide you have to go. This
Okay.
one happens to be like 33 inches.
All
You go to
right.
your calculator, you put in your 33 inches, you divide it by the smallest number on the stencil, which is
Okay.
11, and you know you're going to get 3 full repeats in there. So you start from the corner and then you work yourself into it.
And then if it's not quite that, and you have to, if you want
if
to
it's
push
not
it
quite,
down,
it'll tell you, it's the first full number, so you just push it down. 11 inches just happens to be
Yeah.
what this divides by really well. I just guessed at it, I guess. But then you just trace your lines in. And see, I've done some lines here where you just trace in your lines.
and you start, and then what you flip.
You start at the corner. This one you flip because it's got, see, here's where we started on the corner. And then we flip it over, line up the star, get the next one in,
okay.
then this one will flip the other way, and then you just
Okay.
continue down around.
And then you machine quilted
And you
all
machine
those
quilted,
designs.
yeah.
Now, what did you do with the rickrack?
Well, then we added rickracks, so we have more quilting around here. Of course,
Uh-huh.
we've got some nice maxi rickrack that we just put around the outer edge.
that's great.
And to change, you just flip it over, and then because it is a big rickrack, this one can tuck into the ends here, so you just
it's
get
like
a little sawtooth.
picot
Yeah.
edging along there. And you
Yes.
added the tassels.
And you add tassels, of course, around the edges, and that's it.
And these are the things that make that room look so special.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks for joining me, Pat.
Thank you. I love coming.
Joining us today on Quilt Central is Patricia Bolton. She's the editor-in-chief of the new Quilting Arts Magazine. Welcome, Patricia.
Thank you, Jane. It is so wonderful to be in your house. It is just gorgeous. All these quilts are just simply breathtaking.
Oh, and we love your new magazine.
Thank you.
Could you show us a few things about it?
Sure. Well, first I'll let you know that we are dedicated entirely to embellished quilting. That's what sets us apart from some of the other quilting publications, is that we are dedicated to the arts related to contemporary art quilting, crazy quilting, landscape quilting, anything that really lends itself to embellishing.
And what inspired you to do this?
Well, I started crazy quilting a couple years ago and just was so taken with it and looked around, and there wasn't another magazine that was dedicated to embellished quilting, including not just crazy quilting, but contemporary art quilting and specific techniques.
Yes, I haven't seen anything like it.
Thank you. Well, what I've tried to do with my editorial team is to have a magazine that covers various techniques that's geared for both the beginning embellished quilter to the advanced embellished quilter. So we have an array of things in each issue. Artist in profile, where we may feature a quilter and have like 3 or 4 pieces of his or her work. Specific techniques that lend themselves to embellishing, working with beads, with silk ribbon embroidery, all those sorts of fun things that can be found on an embellished quilt.
So there are special focuses for just about anyone that wants to embellish their quilt.
Sure. And what we also do is, for example, in this issue, this was our spring-summer issue, is we also like to invite writers from various museums and such to write about some of the art quilts that are out there. And Jennifer Gilbert from the New England Quilt Museum did a beautiful piece in this issue.
It is gorgeous. All the color pictures and everything.
Yes.
It really does tell you how to do things too, doesn't it?
It does. It tells you, it offers tips on how to achieve some of the looks of some of the really well put together quilts that are out there. What we don't do is we don't offer very specific patterns for quilts. We try and show techniques for embellishing your quilts and then really letting the artist embark on their own creative path.
Well, everyone has their own way of being creative,
Yes.
so it just has to kind of give you the general structure of things, and then they can go from there.
Absolutely. We have a lot of what we call eye candy in the magazine.
And it certainly does have that, gorgeous color pictures and examples of things. So we are very happy to show this new magazine. Where can people get this?
Oh, we're available on newsstands nationwide and internationally, and people do and can subscribe.
Okay, well, that is wonderful. Well, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Jane.
Visit the Quilt Central website at www.quiltcentraltv.com for more information on this program.
I just love that little clown theme.
It was great, and that wall hanging was beautiful. And next time, we're going to be taking a trip through the Quilters Museum at the American Quilters Society. So I hope you'll join us then.
Funding for Quilt Central has been provided by the American Quilter Society, dedicated to promoting today's quilter. Sulky of America, taking creativity to new heights with decorated threads, stabilizers, and books. Bernina of America, nothing sews like a Bernina. Nothing. Pennywinkle Valley Ranch, the home quilting system. EZ Quilting by Wrights. Share the excitement. Quilting Arts Magazine. Techniques for art, quilting, and embellishments. Quilting Machines International. Providing quilting machines and supplies for the world. FreeSpirit Fabrics. Quilting fabrics with style.